Chapter 2. The Woodpecker Fleet. The Countdom of Caesar was not the only star system the Woodpecker Fleet retreated from. It was the only one that saw combat, and it accommodated personnel and materials now that over 30 star systems would be abandoned. The majority of those systems were small-scale military bases, but some were also domains. That being the case, the Woodpecker Fleet now contained a miscellany of ships. In addition, 1 countess, 2 barons, and 5 magistrates were hitching a ride on the flagship Hauka. During the voyage back, Duir often invited them and their families to sup with him. It was on one such occasion that the Countess of Caesar asked him a question. What are Royspienager, His Highness the Vice-Emperor's thoughts? His thoughts about what? Asked Duir. I would always give thanks when the star forces came. I thought they must have traveled quite some distance to provide support. It's no mistake to believe we have come to help. That I do not doubt. Having said that, however, I cannot shake the suspicion it was just a side goal done while attending to some other more pressing matter. What you're insinuating is that it might have been done as part of a large-scale evacuation, said the Lie of Sorzen, Baron of Sorzen. A man with hair the color of blue ice. He was the last of the nobles to join up with the Woodpecker Fleet. Well, yes, said the Countess. Truth be told, the Baron of Sorzen told Duir, I was surprised when the evacuation order was issued to my domain as well. I feared perhaps the enemy had drawn that close. No, the Limscore Sorzen was safe. Then why? All the nobles dining at the table gazed Duir's way. I'm sure my father in Seskar has an explanation, said Duir, in an attempt to squash the subject. Much to Duir's chagrin, however, it appeared the nobles had no intention of straying from it. Might Fidubuser be planning to abdicate the vice-emperorship? Asked the Baron of Sorzen. Goodness. The Countess of Caesar and the rest of the nobles kept staring at Duir. No. Or at least, I've heard no such thing from my father, Duir hastened to reply. Oh, that's a shame. I thought I might be able to get you to invite me to the enthronement ceremony of Royspienager, His Highness the new vice-emperor. The Countess of Caesar cracked a smile, but then she tilted her head with curiosity. Would there even be an enthronement ceremony for that occasion? When my father assumed the position, there was no particularly bombastic ceremony for it, said Duir, elated that the topic had shifted. In fact, my house is known for disliking ceremonies in general. Your Highness's house being the royal house of Cryeb, if I'm correct, said the Baron of Sorzen. That's correct. And there probably won't be a ceremony even in the event the vice-emperorship is passed down. Considering the situation, I don't think a celebratory banquet would be in good taste. I say that it's precisely during times like these that a little color is necessary, said the Countess. My one regret is how austerely I went about the land-world citizen farewell. A sorrowful parting song was made and everything too. Would you have sung that song, Countess? No. I had a contract with a singer from Dobesh. The plan was to have him sing it. So, what happened to that singer? He went back home, naturally. I wonder whether I'll ever hear his sweet voice again. The Countess stared at Duir. Duir was tempted to say I'm sure you will, but Avriels were not allowed to make such irresponsible remarks. I hope you get to reunite with your dear land-world citizens, said Duir. He was sure he could get away with saying that much. At the very least, he wasn't lying. He truly hoped for the Countdom of Caesar's restoration. Duir tried to steer the discussion to the topic of singing, but the Baron of Sorzen mercilessly ended the digression. Lanyu, accept my utmost apologies for my rudeness, but that's not what I was trying to inquire into. Then what is it you would like to know? Replied Duir politely, though he was sick to the back teeth. My worry is that the position of vice-emperor will disappear altogether. At this, the Countess of Caesar knitted her brows. Don't tell me you foresee us surrendering, Lanyulaev. No, of course not. The thought never crossed my mind. Royspienager is not a Biboth but an Avriel after all. He would never do something so absurd, no matter the circumstances. My Lanyu. How audacious of you to compare the imperial family to the Biboth clan. Duir gave the Countess of Caesar a small nod of gratitude for gently chiding him. Forgive my impropriety. In any case, surrender is out of the question. The nobles concurred. Next, a question from another noble, the Lief Nerizer, Baron of Nurazak. So, what did you mean, Lanyu? What's this about the vice-emperorship disappearing? I mean the potential abandonment of maintaining the empire as it stands. Could you be more specific? I'm entertaining the notion that the territories become drastically reduced and the rest is temporarily left in enemy hands. The Baron of Sorzena's conjecture was unfortunately correct. Duir had heard about his father's plan of action following his previous mission, when he was dispatched as the Vice-Emperor's special envoy to the Druhin Kvat, or Countdom of Kvath, whose land world, Setzelinic,'s administration declared secession from the Empire. No contact could be made with the Dru Kvat. It wasn't even clear whether Kvatha's liege was active over in Area 1 or just dead. The Countdom was governed by a magistrate, but the citizens of Setzalinic had caught wind of their liege's absence. It seemed they'd gathered information the best they could and concluded that nothing was to be gained from remaining in the Empire. Which wasn't, in Duir's eyes, cause to be that quick to secede, but he figured they must have their reasons. Needless to say, Duir's task was to persuade them to stay within the Empire's economic sphere and keep sending their sons and daughters to the Star Forces as well as to other organs of the Empire. As usual, an official with expertise was made vice envoy, and an official from Setzalinic accompanied them too. Naturally, Duir relied on their great acumen. Yet their efforts went in vain. Though they were welcomed there by the magistrate, the Land World Administration was decidedly colder. While they didn't go so far as to turn down negotiations, nothing came of them apart from an agreement to continue negotiations. The vice-envoy was given full authority regarding those negotiations. Duir had had no choice but to leave a single carrycraft for the magistrate and the officials who stayed behind, and pull out with nothing to show for it. The day after Duir returned to the Seskar Viscountdom and reported the disappointing news back to his father, Duir was informed of their policy going forward. Area 2 would deliberately cut back on their holdings and essentially cloister themselves away until contact with Area 1 was re-established. As a matter of fact, the industrial power keeping the Area 2 fleet aloft was already concentrated in the Seskar Viscountdom. It had enough resources and could be self-sufficient for millennia. His father didn't outright say it, but Duir worried the failed negotiations with the Setzalinic Land World Administration was the nail in the coffin. At the same time, Duir also thought giving up on maintaining the Empire's current dominion was probably the best course of action. While it had already been encroached upon quite a bit, Area 2 was still too vast for their current force of arms to protect, and winning was a pipe dream. By gathering the fleet in one place and focusing on defense, they could keep the fighting going for the longest possible span of time. Though the fact they were ultimately leaving it all up to Area 1 was an upsetting one, they had no other choice. Duir kept mum about all of it. As of now, only a handful of high-ranking officials and officers had been told. And while Duir was apparently one of that select few, the nobles seated around the dining table were not. "I wish I knew, but I'm afraid I don't," smiled Duir. The nobles could tell he was lying, but they could also tell he was forced to lie. I see. So then, shall we enjoy, amongst ourselves, a debate based on nothing concrete?" asked the Baron of Sorzen. "I don't see why not," nodded the Countess of Kaysar. "Though to be honest, I can't think of a way to attack your position, Manulief. Right now, I'm just interested in where we would be secluding ourselves. I can't imagine where it would be besides the Seskar Viscountdom. I'm sure you agree, Fee. My father always states he will defend the Seskar Viscountdom to the death, so if, hypothetically speaking, we were to choose a single place, there would be no reason to choose anywhere besides Seskar." Duir reckoned he was allowed to say that much. "So it really would be Seskar." The Countess of Kaysar's expression turned dark. "Oh dear, not thrilled with a stay in Seskar?" asked the Baron of Nurazak. "Not that I don't understand feeling restless residing in another person's star fief. Land world citizens don't live there." The Baron of Nurazak emitted an amazed little rasp of breath. "I suppose grandees perceive things differently from us." Grandee was the word for particularly high-ranking nobles who possessed inhabited planets. Of society generally considered it odd to express admiration for land peoples. "You misunderstand," said the Countess. "I simply fear there might be no more new imperial citizens." Baron Nurazak rubbed his chin. Well, if you ask me, that isn't something to fret over too much. The military doesn't need that many landers to begin with. Don't get me wrong, our ship's survival rates are higher when NCCs are aboard, but if you look at it from a different angle, that's all their presence does. When it comes to pure piloting and combat, star pilots alone ought to be sufficient. My, Baron, you're a brave soul, chuckled the Countess. Baron Nurazak appeared a bit huffy. I'm not making light of the survival rates of individual ships. Far from it. We must, however, look at the overall picture. Instead of repeatedly engaging in reckless battles to protect the multitude of land worlds, we should decrease ship losses by narrowing down the number of places we are to protect. In so doing, even more star pilot lives would be saved, compared to fighting alongside NCCs. Unfortunately, I don't know the numbers offhand to be making quantitative arguments here and now, but given that His Highness the Vice Emperor is of the same mind, would it be a stretch to assume he has decided to abandon all the NCC wellsprings, that is, land worlds, for the time being? The Countess nodded. I don't know whether Fee Royspienager is of the same mind, but I don't doubt Your Excellency makes a good point. Yet without imperial citizens, no new family lineages can arise. Baron Nurazak looked at her blankly. What would be so sad about that? It's true that some imperial citizens are promoted to of gentry. Such is the Empire's spirit of charity. Or perhaps, the prize it awards those who have contributed to it. It makes eminent sense. But isn't accepting imperial citizens in order to thus recompense them putting the cart before the horse? You are mistaken, Lanyu, said Countess Kaysar. They are, as it were, Ovs in the making. Sure, more than a few may not desire to become Ovs, but it is through the provision of new Ovlines from a diverse array of land worlds that the Empire's dynamism and vitality are maintained. Baron Nurazak wore an awkward and embarrassed expression. His surname was Jung, which signified he was related by blood to the Ov progenitors, the Riders of the Dawn, the initial biodroids created in the long-gone Mother City. The surname of Countess Kaysar, meanwhile, was Scion, signifying the descendants of those who obtained a noble rank after graduating from land world citizen to imperial citizen to gentry. Duyur suddenly remembered the landworlder count. The man had been quite close to Duyur's sister. He wondered whether that was still the case now. Were they even still alive, for that matter? Well said Baron Sorzen. And that's another reason I posited Fee Royspienager might intend to abdicate his position. I believe he may well wish to give his duties as the Area 2 Fleet Commander-in-Chief his undivided attention. Until now, His Highness has preserved the Empire, albeit only a portion of it. As a consequence, he has also shouldered the duty of assimilating land peoples up to the stars. Were he to refrain from ruling over a portion of the Empire, however, he would then be freed from that obligation as well. Dear me, said Countess Kaysar. You don't think Seskar will be maintained as a portion of the Empire? That's not unthinkable, but wouldn't deeming a single star system as half of the Empire be much too sorrowful? Who's to say it will only be a single star system? Even if it ends up being 10 or so systems, my sentiment remains the same. Then what position will we be left in? What happens if we stop being part of the Empire? Isn't it obvious? We will be in effect an isolated nation surrounded by hostile powers. No one had a rebuttal for Baron Sorzena's supposition. Duyur didn't know whether his father would stop being Vice-Emperor, and he had to wonder, even if he did continue to go by that title, would it eventually become pro forma? I must say, though, said Baron Nurazak, it must be paining Fee Royspienager and Fee Glaherer a great deal. It certainly is, said Duyur, nodding. And I must presume the present situation is paining not just us two, but all of kind, he pointed out calmly. Yes, but I say that because the royal house of Cryeb is now forced to entrust its fate to His Majesty, a man from the royal house of Barca, of all houses. Ah, I see. You're operating under a misunderstanding, Lanulayef, Duyur smiled. I too have heard the rumor that the royal houses of Cryeb and Barca are at odds. But I assure you it is counterfactual. When I was a young child, Dusanyu Aramida treated me kindly. My deepest apologies. Baron Nurazak bowed his head, but by the looks of him, he didn't really believe what Duyur said. Yet it was true. Duyur harbored neither the royal house of Barca nor Dusanyu any ill will. The only conflict that was, secretly, weighing on his mind lay in Seskar, and that was the antagonism between his father and Star Force's Admiral Koponi, who, it seemed, was hypercritical of his passive approach. Duir was sure she'd call voluntarily abandoning the territories the height of madness. There were even rumors she once made quite the disturbing remark, along the lines of, maybe it was a mistake to follow him just because he's an Imperial. Though that was very difficult to believe. What couldn't be denied was how often she admonished the Vice-Emperor. Duir, for his part, agreed with his father. The fate of the Empire was to be entrusted to Area 1. No matter how hard the Area 2 fleet fought, it wouldn't have much bearing on the overall war. Neither Dubious nor Koponi were power players in the chess game of history, let alone Duir.